Street photography has always intimidated me. I never knew what to shoot, I lacked inspiration, and honestly, I didn't even fully understand the genre of street photography. I keep waiting for the right moment to start, but it never came. But while in Japan recently, I decided to change that. I dedicated a full week to learn and practice street photography with my Nikon ZF. And here are 5 key tips I learned from 5 well-known street photographers here on YouTube. Documentary versus fine art street photography. One of the biggest realizations I had was that not all street photography is the same. There is a huge difference between this fine art and documentary street photography. I recently discovered this distinction from watching Faisal Westcott's video, where he explained that the documentary approach focuses on capturing raw, unedited moments to strive for realism, while the fine art approach emphasizes light, composition, and mood. And after watching that video, I realized that my voice and the style that I want to practice in street photography leans heavily towards the fine art style, moving away from the more traditional and strict documentary approach. And this resonates with a really great piece of advice that I got from my friend Adrian. Go out to take photos in the street. Not trying to stick to street photography stricto sensu and any opinionated definition of what it is or what it is not. Hearing that made me realize that my lifestyle, landscape, and portraiture work can cross over into the genre of street photography, and I don't have to adhere to these strict and counterproductive rules in street photography. I'm the type of person who likes to edit their photos. I enjoy cropping and having the ability to remove distracting elements. I also prefer not to intentionally take photos of people's faces, as I don't want to invade their personal space, and I don't find inspiration from this type of photography, especially by this guy.
I see in black and white.
And these are all aspects that I thought street photography was strictly about. This fine art approach in street photography has been invaluable. Learning this approach prior to my trip to Japan was a huge help, as it provided me with the creative freedom to take photos that I'm personally interested in and want to capture, rather than being restricted by a set of rules established by past photographers. Now, regardless whether you want to pursue the fine art or the documentary approach in street photography, gear unfortunately plays an important role in how you shoot. The documentary approach aims to show life exactly how it happens, meaning no editing. If I was going to go down that path, I would definitely shoot on film or FujiFilm, since they deliver a distinct creative look straight out of camera. Another thing to consider is confidence and being discreet. That's why I found the Nikon ZF gave me an advantage over my Sony a7 IV. It's a film camera design, making it feel less intrusive and helped me blend into the background, which gave me a lot of confidence, as I did feel like a fly on the wall in the streets. I'm definitely not saying that this is the perfect camera for street photography, because it's not. Smaller cameras like the FujiFilm X100V, Ricoh GR, or even an iPhone are much better suited for street photography, especially when starting out. That's why Leica is so popular among street photographers. It's small, discreet, and far less noticeable than my Sony a7 IV with a large 24-70 lens attached. So for me, a compact camera and 3 compact lenses in this relatively small sling from K&F Concept is all that I needed. And a light setup meant that I stayed out shooting for longer, and I definitely found the combination of 28, 50, and 90mm primes work the best compared to when I used my zoom in Hokkaido. As with the zoom lens, I felt too incisive in what focal length to shoot, which caused a delay resulting in me missing shots. While with a prime, you have to commit and make the composition work. One thing that really did surprise me was using manual lenses with zone focusing. I shot with the Thypoch 28 and 50mm lens, which allowed me to preset my focal distance and shoot without worrying whether my images were in focus and sharp. This meant I could focus entirely on lighting and composition, rather than my camera settings. And with that said, that brings me to my next point of lighting. Alright guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Lighting in street photography is something that I struggled with due to the many complex lighting situations I encountered while shooting in the city in particular. One of these situations is front lighting. I typically avoid front lighting at all costs for my portraiture and lifestyle images, as it results in flat images with no depth. In contrast, when shooting in the city, you encounter these pockets of light on sunny days. Even though these pockets of light are front lit, they provide depth and layers from the different shadows created by the tall buildings. There was also times when I would find a compelling scene or an interesting subject, but the lighting just was not working for me. And a tip from Roman Fox provided to be very helpful in this situation. He said, try to find good light, as that can make or break an image. Also look for reflections, diffusions, or anything that can add another dimension to the shot, but like the first two photos from my last post. This advice made me realize the importance of seeking good light first and then finding an interesting subject or scene within that lighting, rather than finding an interesting scene and just hoping for good light. On sunny days, I would look down the street to see where the light was hitting and literally just follow the light. This approach helped me find good lighting, and then interesting compositions would just become obvious. I'll be honest, reflection photography is quite challenging, and I felt I never got any amazing shots with reflections. However, for diffusion, I found that using larger focal lengths like a 90 or a 50mm worked much better than wider focal lengths. During the evenings in the city, especially in Tokyo, it's relatively easy to find good light at night, so a fast prime lens is not always necessary. My 90mm with an aperture of f2.8 was sufficient. However, sometimes I found my subjects a little too dark compared to the bright background. To address this, I took a really bold step and used this little flash from Godox to give the subject more exposure and better contrast against the background. And I must admit, I only attempted this towards the end of my week in Japan, as this required a lot of confidence. Lacking confidence is a struggle that pretty much every single street photographer has encountered, and I'm definitely not excluded from this. Even though I am a rather confident and extroverted person, I still want to avoid conflict and confrontation as much as the next person. Taking photos of people within your composition can be a daunting task. But I received two very valuable tips from friends. The first one is from Carlo, who said, if you want to take a photo of someone, just pretend you're waiting for them to move. Now, this was a huge help for me, as I don't like the idea of taking close-up photos of people's faces without their consent. However, I find it interesting to capture the back of someone's head or body walking into the frame. So this tip of holding your camera up and waiting for them to walk into the frame and maintaining that position until they leave the frame, they may realize that you were really just waiting for them to move. But if you quickly take a photo and bring your camera down, they might assume that you're taking a photo of them, which could lead to the confrontation that we're all trying to avoid. The next tip comes from Faye, who said, give yourself some time to warm up. Seeing compositions quickly is a genuine skill. I'm still learning it every day, since I'm also a startup street photographer. I found that by forcing myself to take the long route when going out to get food or a coffee while bringing my camera, I can improve my comfort level. In the first 10 to 15 minutes, I would often get no good images. However, the longer I spent out, the more comfortable I became, which resulted in better images. So if you're struggling in the first half an hour to an hour, that is completely fine. We all go through this. After a while, you will start to realize what works and what doesn't. You'll become more familiar with your surroundings, which gives you an overall boost in confidence. Once you've warmed up, you will feel confident enough to linger longer in areas with good lighting and interesting scenes, and that's where timing and patience comes into play. I found my best shots were when I discovered an interesting scene with good lighting and then waited for an interesting subject to enter the frame. I figured this out towards the end of my trip. Initially at the start, I was just taking photos of everything and anything, which resulted in just a few keepers, but majority of them I didn't even bother to edit. A good example of this was when I was capturing a composition of Tokyo Tower. I was hoping for the Tokyo Tower lights to come on, so I lingered around the corner of the street and I captured some of my best images before the lights even turned on. It was also a little bit disappointing that when the lights did turn on, the arrangement was not what I'd hoped for. It resembled a Christmas tree, while I wanted more orange lights against the blue hour, so the lighting situation that I waited for never actually occurred. If I decided to come back in half an hour when the lights were on, I would have missed my best shots. So once you find good lighting and an interesting scene, set up your composition and wait for subjects to enter your frame. This approach reduces a lot of the guesswork in street photography, as you're focusing on one key element rather than multiple factors at once, which can be overwhelming. However, if you are in a good scene and there hasn't been a good subject within the first 10 to 15 minutes, it's just time to move on, and you need to learn when to make that call. Alright guys, so I had an amazing time to practice street photography while I was in Japan, and I consistently went out for 1 hour every single day in a variety of different environments and lighting conditions. And I can honestly say that this practice doesn't require much commitment, and I think if you are a photographer that wants to try out street photography, this is a great approach to take. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Faye, Carlo, Roman, and Adrian. Their YouTube channels and their socials are linked in the description down below. And if you do like the way that I edit my photos, I do sell Lightroom presets. These work across all the different camera brands that I've tested. So if you do like this pastel film look, go check out the link in the description down below and use this discount code for 20% off your entire order. Now, if you want to see a 6-month ownership review of the Nikon ZF, go watch this video right here. And if you want to see more photos and videos from Japan, I've got a cheeky little video coming for you soon. So make sure you subscribe. If you guys like the video, hit the like button, comment why, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.